Yavatir yatanadaya Kramasha samanukramya Puna atra vrachek chuchi Adastana rilokasya Yavatir yatanadaya Kramasha samanukramya Puna atra vrachek chuchi. So we're reading from Canto 3, Chapter 30, Text 34. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Actually, we'll just do the words. Ada start from below. Naralokasya, human birth. Yavati, as many. Yatana, punishments. Adoya, and so on. Kramashaha, in a regular order. Shamanukramya, having gone through. Puna, again. Atra, here on this earth. Avrajet, he may return. Suchi, pure. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Having gone through all the miserable, hellish conditions and having passed in a regular order through the lowest forms of animal life prior to human birth, and having thus been purged of his sins, one is reborn again as a human being on this earth. Purport. Just as a prisoner who has undergone troublesome prison life is set free again, the person who is always engaged in impious and mischievous activities is put into hellish conditions, and when he has undergone different hellish lives, namely those of lower animals like cats, dogs, and hogs, by the gradual process of evolution, he again comes back as a human being. In Bhagavad Gita it is stated that even though a person engaged in the practice of the yoga system may not finish perfectly and may fall down for some reason or other, his next life as a human being is guaranteed. It is stated that such a person who has fallen from the path of yoga practice is given a chance in his next life to take birth in a very rich family or in a very pious family. It is interpreted that rich family refers to a big mercantile family because generally people who engage in trades and mercantile business are very rich. One who engaged in the process of self-realization or connecting with the Supreme Absolute Truth but fell short is allowed to take birth in such a rich family, or he is allowed to take birth in the family of pious brahmanas. Either way, he is guaranteed to appear in human society in his next life. It can be concluded that if someone is not willing to enter into hellish life, as in Tamishra or under Tamishra, then he must take to the process of Krishna consciousness, which is the first-class yoga system, because even if one is unable to attain complete Krishna consciousness in this life, he is guaranteed, at least, to take his next birth in a human family. He cannot be sent into a hellish condition. Krishna consciousness is the purest life, and it protects all human beings from gliding down to hell to take birth in a family of dogs or hogs. Om Agyan Timirandasya Ginangana Shalakaya Chakshuran Malitamyena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, and my spiritual masters kindly opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. So we've just read this chapter called Description of Adverse Fruitive Activities from the Canto 3, from the third canto. And this is the final verse of this chapter. And so it's been reading specifically, we've been hearing about different hellish destinations and what goes on there and how one is prepared for those places, the process after death. And here it's explained that those engaged in impious and mischievous activities, that is the destination for such souls who have chosen to engage in impious acts or mischievous activities, a mischievous path. So what is that? So it's explained further as we're going along. So Prabhupada's explained here that once one has reached those hellish conditions, which he also includes taking birth as a cat or a dog or a hog, not just going to those particular planets, but here on this planet, he's considering that those lives are also hellish. But of course, we see in the Western countries at present that those births are actually not so hellish, in the sense that they often rule the roost. The cats and the dogs rule the roost of the homes. They're worshipped almost and taken priority. That's what we can perceive. When I was cleaning homes once, I went to these houses here in Whenuapai. They were they were huge palaces. They were massive homes. Some as, almost as big as this whole temple. Huge homes, and these tiny, weeny little fox terriers would be running around inside, while the people who owned the homes were out in their jobs or wherever they were, and they left early in the morning and they came back late at night. And these little dogs are running around in these big homes. But the thing is that actually they are hellish, because nowadays, even in the West, once the dog gets a disease, then they're put down. The cats are also just, their lives are terminated. The humans have that, prerogative they put in our society, that once there's a philosophy that once the animal is suffering, then we should remove the suffering by putting that living entity down. So we understand from the scriptures that if the life of an animal is taken before its time that it's supposed to stay, it has to re-enter into that form. So a dog that's running around in this palace in Whenuapai and is put down, which most of them are put down as soon as they get sometimes the diseases are horrible that they have to suffer, but then they're put down, then they have to re-enter into the dog's life, but it might not be such a cushy life. It might be a less than cushy dog life, like we see in India. It's very different, the dog's life in India. You see them, they're malnourished, and they have these dreadful diseases, and the little puppies have these dreadful diseases, and the traffic is nowadays in the West we swerve, but even then we see lots of carnage on the roads with cats and dogs, because they're not aware of the road rules. They get squashed, and in India you see them, and they are you can see when you go there, it's very hellish life. So the soul inside these forms, here it's explained, that you earn that life by engaging in impious and mischievous activities in the human form of life. So it's a big life of responsibility, the human form. And we know people, we're friends, or we've had friendships in the past with people who refuse, they don't want to give up certain activities that are actually impious activities. So often it's hard to convince people about things, but at least amongst the devotees, as we are reading this, we can understand that we've been, saved, so to speak, from hellish life, because our activities are now very different from these mischievous activities. The drinking, like we've just been hearing in this chapter, the drinking, the illicit activities, the eating animals, and gambling activities, these are the impious activities that are not actually the duty of the human being. So the responsibility of the human being is to act in such a way that advances ourselves and advances each other, that uplifts the soul to a higher state of consciousness. And so here Prabhupada's assuring that the person who's practicing yoga, this yoga system, and the practice of a yoga system, but may not finish perfectly, they may fall down for some reason or another, it is guaranteed that because they've started this process of yoga, that they will get a human form in the next life. And this means that this question is asked from Arjuna. Arjuna asks this question: what happens if we start this process that you're wanting? Krishna is explaining to Arjuna the different yogas, how to connect the consciousness to the Supreme. And Arjuna asks, what happens to that person who gives up their materialistic shelter, so to speak, and takes shelter of a yoga system that connects one with the Supreme Personality, or the Supreme Personality and his energies, the Supreme Energy? What happens to those people who give up after some time? They've lost both the material life and they've lost the spiritual life. They're like a riven cloud, Arjuna asks. It's like a cloud that you can see in the sky. It pulls away from a main cloud and it's just drifting along like that, becoming kind of more and more fragmented. We see those clouds. What happens to those types of people? And so Krishna reassures in the Bhagavad Gita that anyone who starts on this path and goes some distance along, they will be born into a family of brahmanas in the next life. So they'll naturally have a mode of goodness life, a sattvic life that they can continue on in a fresh start. And if they've just started a little bit of yoga even, that also means that they'll be born in a rich family, so they can have some facility to continue on. There's not a struggle, not so much of a struggle, because even human beings have to struggle in this world. It is also hellish and difficult to focus the mind. We can see that there's different grades of human births, that some is a hard grind. It's a hard grind, and they're forced by the lower modes of material nature to engage in fruitive life to survive, and they don't know anything sattvic at all because of their karma. And so this yoga practice is very valuable, and it's got great returns, so to speak. You can start, and even if you can't finish, you'll still be positioned well in your next life. So Krishna is assuring Arjuna this, and also another personality, Tamal Krishna Goswami, he also asked this question of Srila Prabhupada. This was when he first met Srila Prabhupada, and he was asking the same question from the audience when Prabhupada was giving a class, and Prabhupada noted this person for his intelligence, because this is the same question that Arjuna was asked. What happens if we start this? Because surrendering to Krishna means giving up our previous shelters, and we've developed these shelters after a long period of time. Even as a child, we take shelter of different material concepts to sort of survive the difficulties. We have these desires that we cultivate from an early age, how to remain protected, how to protect myself from what will I do when I grow up to protect myself from the misery that I perceive. We see the living entities around us suffering. We see our parents and our friends' parents or our friends, and we think, and we start to take shelter of desires, how we're going to live in such a way that will protect me from this suffering. And then by the grace of Krishna and by our good fortune, we meet the devotees and we meet this process of Krishna consciousness. So we have to give up these hardcore processes that our mind has given us how to survive. We have to give them up. We have to surrender material desire, and this is can be quite a big thing for many aspiring devotees, to feel safe with Krishna, to give up this shelter of wealth, to give up the shelter of other sort of heroes in our life, and take shelter of Krishna only. This is what Krishna is asking us. Manmana bhavamad bhakto ati savadamam pritchajama mekam sharanam praja aham from sarvapapebhyo mokshayishyami mastujaha. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I will protect you from all sinful reaction. Do not fear, Masujaha. Do not fear, Krishna's asking. And and this is the meaning of surrender, is to take shelter of Krishna. And there is a beautiful publication by Kula Shekhar Maharaj, and he is giving 9 examples of surrender. He is a surrendered king, and he developed this consciousness of surrender to Krishna. And he composed this poem of different metaphors, analogies that he meditated on to present to the Lord, that I am like this. For example, he likened himself to the child, and when the child is punished by the mother, the young child is punished by the mother, the child runs only to the mother. It's just a phenomenon. You don't see them running off here and there, but they're crying and they know their mother's just given them a hard chastisement, and the child cries and runs to take shelter of the mother only. And he says, I am like this, Krishna, that you can punish me, but I will take shelter of you only. And another example is of the lotus flower he gives. So the lotus flower blooms in the morning when the sun comes up, and the lotus flower's blooming. And as the sun intensifies, then the petals of the lotus are scorched by the sun and becomes very wilted and almost dies. And then as the sun goes down, it closes up and waits the whole night until the morning. Now, the lotus flower, if it was actually able to bloom in the evening and open up for the moon rays, then it will be relieved. It will experience the soothing rays of the moon's light. It will be able to blossom in that light, but it won't feel the scorching rays of the sun, and it will be relieved from that. But however, it chooses not to do that. It stays tightly closed until the morning, and then when the morning sun comes up, it blossoms up happily until the middle of the day again becomes scorched and wilts so much. So Maharaj Kulashekar is explaining that I am like that lotus that will refuse any other shelter. I will only take the shelter of you, Krishna. Even if you scorch me due to your mercy or your system that is punishing me for my mischievous activities, I will accept all of that and not accept any other shelter. And then another example from that poem is the bird. And there's a ship that's coming out from the land, going out to sea, and the bird on the seashore decides to fly with that ship for some time, and it positions itself on the mast of the ship as the ship travels out, and through the day, and at some point the bird decides to return to its nest. So it's travelling, it's flying, it's flying so far, but it is not able to reach the shore because it was on the mast of the ship, and the ship's taken it right out to sea. And when the bird tries to fly, it can't reach the shore. There's no shore to be seen. So the bird comes back to the ship, and then it goes back in the other direction, and it flies. Say it was flying south back, but then it flies north to try and find its nest, and it comes back to the ship. So then it goes west and east, and again it has to come back to the ship because there is no other shelter there. And so he says it's just like this bird. Actually, there's an English verse that says, so much water all around, enough for a ship to sink. That's not exactly right. Then so much water, but not a drop to drink. And that was a poem that had a similar storyline from this, even though this poem by Kulashekar Maharaj was written thousands of years ago. It's exactly the same concept of it was of a bird that had lost its nest and was stranded on this ship. And so he says that I am like this bird that cannot find any shelter in this material world, and that I simply I am driven to just only take shelter of your lotus feet, Krishna. And so there are 6 other analogies that he explains, and he gives these beautiful analogies of surrendering to Krishna. And so this requires a faith, it requires experience in Krishna consciousness, gradual experience of Krishna's faith. And this is why Srila Prabhupada started the ISKCON movement, so that we can start to experience Krishna's shelter. He brought Krishna to the Western countries, and then he took Krishna back to India, so that the whole world can actually have access to Krishna's shelter, and we can develop our faith in such a way, because Krishna doesn't force anyone to love him or to take shelter of him. This is his one thing, that even though he has to arrange this whole system, because if we have a situation where we can fulfill any of our desires according to exactly how we want them, it would be impossible. There's no way that it could actually be, because we've all got such conflicting desires. And so Krishna has arranged this incredible material world so that eventually our material desires can be fulfilled. Once the arrangement and once the situation is made practical, then this desire can be fulfilled and that desire can be fulfilled. And that's Krishna's mercy. So we have this power to desire according to what we want, but if we desire Krishna, then Krishna can free us from being controlled by our desires and being controlled by the modes of nature. Because the modes of nature have to control us, because it's not just my desire, it's everybody else in this material world's desires. That's where it's like a prison house full of desire. And the only way that our desires can be fulfilled is in time, with the power of time and the modes of material nature working. The modes changing all the time, like rope, like different ways that the rope, it's like 3 rope strings of the rope entwined in different ways, and there's these different circumstances that come about by the modes of material nature that will fulfill the desires of everybody according after the time element. And then there's the karma as well, because you have to also have a reaction to your situation, because if we don't have any karmic reaction, then we will never understand what it feels like to be subjected to other people's desire, because that's what it is. Then, we have a desire, we're allowed to fulfill it, but it's actually subjecting other living entities to our desires, and that's fine. Krishna says, yes, if you want that, but at the same time it's only fair that you also experience what that feels like to others. So this is basically karma, and as the activities become more and more hellish, then the reactions also have to become equal and opposite, or equal to that. So that's why then you've got the lower planets. But if you don't want to have anything, if you don't want to experience that anymore, or you find that whole thing quite, alarming, that is good, and that is helpful for us, because we can feel a very positive element of discomfort with those concepts, and then become a little more pious. And so Krishna is Srila Prabhupada is explaining here that pure life is Krishna consciousness. He says here, Krishna consciousness is the purest life, and it protects all human beings from gliding down to hell. So and some people say that this chapter is like a little bit, it is unfavourable for people coming into Krishna consciousness, and they'd rather not have people come and listen to this chapter, because it sounds like the Christian way, that if you don't surrender to God, then you will fall into the, flames of hell, and there's a lot of preaching that goes on like that in the name of religion. But that's actually not the mood of the Bhagavatam at all. Even though we've just heard about the hellish planets, it's never the mood that you'll be eternally condemned in the flames of hell. It's just logical information that if you lead a mischievous life, then you do have to be. It's just mercy, actually. It's just all mercy, just giving you awareness of the consequences of your actions. So, So how to explain this to people actually is sometimes very difficult. And so then Prabhupada's whole strategy is to give them a higher taste. And Krishna's also in the Bhagavatam is equal, that you give someone a higher taste of life, and when they have a higher taste, it's not difficult to give up the lower taste, and then they can understand. So I see actually the devotees who say that they're right in some ways. And one little boy from the Hare Krishna school the other day, we were talking about this chapter, and he was sitting on the table, and he said, he just put his view forward that I reckon that people should come to Krishna because they love Krishna. They shouldn't come to Krishna because they're afraid of hell. And so we were, yeah, that's right, And then, but at the same time, it's not even that we are presenting that. It's not like we have pictures of all the hellish planets around the temple. We're presenting the alternative, the higher alternative, and also very, honestly, Krishna's just revealing to us what's going on in the rest of the universe. And also it's just probably extremely painful for the Lord as the super soul and just as the Lord of everything to see how much in pain we inflict upon each other. That we're so blind and a little bit callous to other people's suffering. So I think it's fair enough that the Lord puts all of this information in, because God consciousness is so unpopular in the Western world anyway, that to become godly and it's just so unpopular that, well done to the Lord for just sort of saying, okay, but then, please be aware that, there are consequences for your actions. So, but anyway, we choose not to. Many devotees choose not to bring this up at all, and that's good. We'll just give a higher taste. And because Krishna consciousness is actually a very delightful process of life. Waking up early, worshipping the deity, chanting Hare Krishna, eating prasadam. So simple, and there is definitely such a great benefit of performing Krishna conscious acts that we can easily convince people. And if we choose to, we could convince people that Krishna consciousness is actually a brilliant alternative to life. And if we can't do it, then just, Srila Prabhupada has so expertly written these books. We just need to give these books to, as gifts to people, and just by opening up, especially in the Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada has put the actual conclusion of Vedic life in each purport, so that people can just open it up and read something very bright and positive and illuminating, and to capture their attention. So I'll finish there. If anyone has any questions or comments or corrections or anything that you'd like to share from your realization. About Krishna consciousness. Okay, Srila Prabhupada ki, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.